Hello, everyone. You are listening to Scenecraft. From opening shots to long takes and epilogues, we examine our favorite scenes from cinema here on the podcast. I'm Cody, here with my co-hosts,
Mark
and Connor.
You can find Scenecraft on most social media platforms at Scenecraft Podcast for the latest news on the show. This has been a big month for moviegoing. Barbenheimer broke many records at the box office. Looking forward to discussing both of them with you guys. We're going to start with Oppenheimer for this episode, and we'll be releasing a Barbie nightcap episode this week, almost like a chaser to Oppenheimer. I think that's our preferred order of viewing almost, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. A little palate cleanser.
Yeah.
I think it's the recommendation, but I actually did see the inverse of that.
Oh.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that.
We'll have to get into that.
We also have a great pro take at the end of this episode. We will be chatting with special effects supervisor on the film, Oscar winner Scott Fisher. All about explosions. It's going to be great. But as usual, let's begin with our brief What We've Been Watching segment, Quick Takes.
Speak quickly.
Quickly, thank you.
Quickly, come on. Hurry up, quicker.
Way quicker.
Okay, I'll say it fast.
What have you been watching this week?
So I watched The Flash, which was directed by Andy Muschietti, and it was released earlier this year, 2023. The logline reads, Barry Allen uses his super speed to change the past, but his attempt to save his family creates a world without superheroes, forcing him to race for his life in order to save the future. Kind of a wordy logline. So let me start off by saying that I'm going to put aside all of the Ezra Miller controversies. I certainly disagree with his actions, but I'm going to try to look at this movie as objectively as I can. So, is this movie the complete disaster that audiences are making it out to be? No. Did I enjoy this movie more than I was expecting as a result of my super low expectations going in? Yes. One of the things that I thought was really clever about The Flash was its use of essentially like a backdoor origin story of how we see the Flash develop his powers as a result of the main character playing with the time mechanics rather than just kind of starting at that point, which we usually see in a lot of superhero movies. It was kind of a fresh spin on an otherwise well-trodden path. I don't think I'm spoiling anything here because it was featured heavily in all the trailers and marketing material, but Michael Keaton's presence in this movie was pretty memorable, and I feel like it helped make this DC film feel a little more distinct than some of the other entries. At the same time, I don't feel like his inclusion is nearly as powerful or purposeful as some of the other notable actors appearing in some of the other Marvel movies. And I think it's kind of an unfair comparison in some ways, but I did like his presence in this movie. Overall, I think this movie is perfectly fine. It suffers from the formulaic, oversized villain CGI battle at the end, but I think there may be enough here to warrant a light recommendation.
Okay.
The second movie I watched was Flamin' Hot, which was directed by Eva Longoria, and it was released in 2023. The logline reads, the inspiring, quote, true, unquote, story of Richard Montañez, who, as a Frito-Lay janitor, disrupted the food industry by channeling his Mexican heritage to turn Flamin' Hot Cheetos from a snack into an iconic global pop culture phenomenon. So this is actually the feature directorial debut for Eva Longoria, and it was released on Hulu in June. And there's a bit of controversy surrounding this one because it covers a rags to riches story that has basically been proven to be fabricated. But for some reason, it's kind of been clung on to, and they decided to make the movie despite a bunch of people saying that it wasn't, factually accurate. So that being said, the movie itself is a perfectly serviceable drama. It has the plot contrivances that you would expect with this kind of territory, but it's a feel-good, easily digestible family movie. And I thought the performances were generally pretty strong, and I got a kick out of seeing some of the period-specific retro packaging. So if you want an easy watch, I think I'd recommend Flaming Hot.
I haven't even heard of this.
This seems like just another in the string of like kind of odd biopic movies that have been coming out recently. You know what I mean?
Blackberry.
Your
Mhm.
Blackberries.
Yeah, I thought Blackberry was definitely a lot better, as was Air.
Air.
But this one, I feel like it's a low stakes kind of fun watch. And I never was a huge fan of Flaming Hot Cheetos, but I actually ended up buying like a bag of them before watching it, just
Oh.
in like preparation
Nice.
for it. So it was kind of fun.
Set the
Yeah,
mood.
and I think it added to the experience. So if you just want a fun watch, I would recommend it for that reason. Connor, what have you been watching recently?
So I haven't had time to watch a ton of stuff, so I've only got one this week. I have been watching How To with John Wilson, created
Nice.
by John Wilson and executive produced by Nathan Fielder and Michael Coleman of Nathan For You.
Yes.
So this show first came out in 2020, and the first episode of the new season just came out. The logline for this one reads, "An anxious New Yorker who attempts to give everyday advice while dealing with his own personal issues." So How To with John Wilson is back for its third and final season. And in kind of a rare turn for us, Mark and I are big fans. But Cody, you've never really picked it up despite Mark and I constantly texting you about it. So what's that all about?
You know, I got it. The first couple episodes I did watch and really loved it. I think I just never, when you just kind of drop a show because something
Yeah,
else
sure.
is coming out and you just don't have time. Whatever the reason, I fully intend to keep watching. So I'll try and catch up by the time you're done so that we can talk about it.
Yeah, please do and report back. But for anyone who hasn't heard of the show, it's kind of a miracle that it's on HBO as a real show because it has a pretty experimental and non-traditional format. How would you describe the show, Mark?
It's almost kind of like a tone poem, and it combines a lot of just B-roll footage that I would imagine a squad of people just kind of going about New York and just filming random kind of eye-opening events,
Mm-hmm.
and then just factoring them into this overarching theme of whatever the episode is. Some of them that come to mind were the How to Make the Perfect Risotto
Mm-hmm.
episode, or How to Protect Your Furniture.
Yeah, right.
These types of like general questions.
No, it's a super interesting watching experience, and I've never really seen anything like it. So, like Mark said, it usually starts with some benign topic like how to make small talk or something like that, and it veers off into odd directions as John Wilson follows these different rabbit holes to see where they take him. And he usually stumbles onto some pretty profound human truths along the way. It's also very funny, not in a laugh out loud way, but more through these unexpected juxtapositions of how he pairs the words of the story he's telling with weird images.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he gets himself into super weird situations and they can be pretty shocking. So just a bit of a warning there. I would recommend checking out How To with John Wilson if you're looking for something that's more thought-provoking versus a straightforward show, and you can stream it on Max. What about you, Cody? What have you been watching?
So I've been doing a little more light watching recently. Like work has been challenging. It's been busy in the personal life. So I've opted to do, a little bit of light reading, nothing too challenging. And
Sure.
my first choice, which I am currently rewatching with my wife, is a certain show from the early 2000s that I think Mark would appreciate. And let me give you a little hint.
The OC. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So we started rewatching that, the first couple episodes. If you haven't seen The OC by now, the logline reads, "A troubled youth becomes embroiled in the lives of a close-knit group of people in the wealthy upper-class neighborhood of Newport Beach, Orange County, California." So that brings you back, right, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it was about the show, but we used to just streamline entire seasons like in one sitting.
Yeah, back when you had to buy the box sets,
Right.
You can
My
just
God.
stream them on
Yeah.
Wow.
TV.
I think like that isn't a show that I normally would think I would like or be into, but I think there's just something about the far off setting of California. And at the time we're in like snowy, wintry, Chicago suburb. So I think there was that aspect and kind of our potential desire to be in LA and what that is like, and just seeing these characters all interact in high school, which at the time, like we were in the same position.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really fun to re-examine this show and kind of discover how dated it is, but in this like kind of cheeky, fun way, almost sort of like Connor, how I imagine you felt about Coyote Ugly.
Oh yeah,
A little bit, maybe not quite that far. So that's been super fun to watch with my wife and just kind of laugh at it a little bit, but enjoy it. And there are actually some really special moments in it that they captured well. And just reading a little bit about the background and the making of it is interesting too. The OC is available on Hulu and Max and a couple other platforms. I'd recommend you check it out if you haven't already. It's an interesting cultural touchstone to that period of time.
It was such an important show at the time, too.
Mhm.
I feel like it was just everybody's talking point, and it informed a lot about music at the time, too.
oh yeah.
They featured a lot of like up and coming bands at the time, and some of them owe their explosion into, popularity and relevance from their exposure on the show.
Yeah, definitely. Then next up, something that we've been watching recently to celebrate the release of Barbie, which at the top of the episode, we mentioned that we're going to do a nightcap episode on Barbie with 2 special guests. And in light of that, one of these special guests and I have been watching Barbie Dreamhouse Challenge on HGTV. This is a home renovation reality show. Again, very light reading. And so we've been watching that, hosted by supermodel, designer, author, entrepreneur Ashley Graham. She's the host. And then it features just a bunch of HGTV personalities, hosts who have their own shows on the network, who are tasked with designing particular rooms in a house and renovating it to be a Barbie dream house. And it's two sets of, Mark, you're shaking your head. It's, light reading. It's very light reading.
No, it's just, I'm just thinking about like, just imagine having that room for the rest of your life. Or
I think
for
it's
the rest of the time you live.
If I was paying
that
attention
house.
enough, I think it's being used as like a rentable,
Oh, okay.
like
Okay.
an Airbnb attraction almost.
Okay, yeah. I was just picturing somebody like giving the tour of their house to somebody and being like, "Oh yeah, this is the Barbie room."
Oh wait, every room is the Barbie room.
Right.
Yeah. It's really fun to watch them take inspiration from all these existing Barbie dream houses. And again, I've very little experience in that world, but they kind of do that nice thing where they give comparisons to the real thing. They visit Mattel at a certain point. So that's been really fun, and I'd recommend it as just sort of an easy watch, something to turn your brain off and celebrate Barbie as a whole if you want more Barbie content in your life. So that's Barbie Dreamhouse Challenge on HGTV. All right, now let's move into our discussion about Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, starring Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, and Matt Damon, among many others. And as with all of our scene selections, beware of spoilers ahead.
We had a moment where it looked like the chain reaction from an atomic device might never stop. Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world? Chances are near zero. Near zero. What do you want for theory alone? Zero would be nice.
The log line from IMDb. The story of American scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his role in the development of the atomic bomb. Before we dig in, quick reminder that we'll be joined by special effects supervisor on the film, Scott Fisher, for his pro take at the end of the episode. Mark, what did you think of Oppenheimer?
Okay, so as you guys know, I am a sucker for a good character study. You could say it's catnip for me. And after finding out that Christopher Nolan was making one, I was immediately excited. And I thought Oppenheimer was very good. Talk about a morally complex subject. It would be hard to find another historical event that carries as much inherent weight as the creation of the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely not a history buff, but there appears to be a lot of respect for historical accuracy, which can be tough to do when you're also trying to construct an quote entertaining end quote narrative for the audience at the same time. Fortunately, I think Nolan did a tremendous job pulling this off, thanks to the help of his incredible cast and production work. It should be noted that this is a 3-hour, dialogue-heavy adult drama, so it's not going to appease everybody. And I find it even more amusing because it likely captured a lot of Barbenheimer audience that would otherwise not have any interest in seeing a movie like this. There's a few things I think that get in the way of making this a complete masterpiece, in my opinion. I respect Nolan's decision to present a nonlinear retelling of these events in order to avoid the overdone plot beats that you see in most biopics, and also to maximize dramatic tension. But at the same time, I think this also led to a dizzying number of edits and jumps in time that often prevented me from fully sitting in the gravity of whatever was being depicted on screen. And this kind of reminds me of a lot of his other films in that it really does deserve a rewatch to fully appreciate the intricacies of the edit,
Mm-hmm.
which may be a tall order to do given its 3-hour runtime. But unlike Tenet, you can actually walk away from one viewing of Oppenheimer and still have a grasp of what you just saw, if you guys know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
You're not completely lost. And I think it also helps that it's based on a historic event. Connor, what did you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you said. I thought Oppenheimer super well made, and clearly the life and legacy of Robert Oppenheimer is important to Christopher Nolan. And at the time of us making this episode, it just broke the box office record for the biggest second weekend ever for an R-rated summer movie with an estimated $46 million. So that brings its domestic total to $174 million so far.
Wow.
Yeah. And right now it's Nolan's sixth biggest film of all time, ahead of Tenet and Batman Begins.
Which doesn't that say a lot about Nolan that this
It's only his sixth.
It's only his sixth highest, and yet it's the second highest R-rated film in the summer of all time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild. I found the movie itself kind of hard to argue with. It's a biopic that covers the creation of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the US, plain and simple. Even though it's a very straightforward movie, I found it refreshing because, like you mentioned, Mark, there's no convoluted time mechanic from Nolan like we've seen in Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet, basically like the movies he's made for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to really oversimplify it and say the first hour introduces Oppenheimer and who he is. The second hour shows the development of the atomic bomb. And the third hour follows a courtroom hearing of Oppenheimer during the McCarthy era.
Mm-hmm.
So I texted with you a bit about this, Cody, but I thought that first hour felt weirdly condensed.
Right.
Like I was watching a really long trailer for the movie instead of seeing the actual movie itself. I really, really enjoyed the middle section when we finally hit that real time, so to speak, with the Trinity Test sequence. I know the movie covers a ton of ground, but my one wish is that the rest of the movie's pace felt a little bit more like that second act. It just gave us more time to get a sense of who these characters are when we can linger on the scenes a bit longer. I don't know about you guys. I didn't really find the female characters to be all that compelling in general. Florence Pugh and Emily Blunt, they're both great, but I felt like they were working with so little. They were almost like caricatures versus the real actual people that they were based on.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuck out to me a bit. Outside of that, it's a very good movie. Again, there's not really anything wrong with it at all, but I just didn't think it was like amazing for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now that you're pointing out these beats, I feel that way too. At the same time, I was just completely floored by the experience of Oppenheimer. I think looking at it retroactively, these things do pop out at you, but I did love it.
Nice.
I agree with both of you. It's not perfect. There were still a few Nolanisms, like the famous Krishna death quote being randomly chosen during a sex scene from a book that he reads verbatim in Sanskrit.
Yeah.
But I think this is Christopher Nolan working at the top of his game while exercising restraint where it's most needed. This movie could have been so many different things. The perspective could have been really jingoistic and irresponsible with a different filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate what Nolan decided to do with this extremely weighty and sensitive subject matter. The way he and Van Hoytema shot this, mostly in IMAX, brings a completely distinct and unprecedented texture and immersion that I've only experienced in other Nolan films, and still probably not to this degree. We will get much further into the weeds, but this is probably one of my favorite scores in recent memory. The tension that Ludwig Göransson is able to create in tandem with the pacing of the detonation scene is masterful. I think that he has a serious shot at another Oscar for this one.
Nice.
And with that, let's get into that same detonation scene, arguably the showpiece of the whole film, which we're going to call Trinity Test. Connor, would you like to give us the scene beats, please?
I would love to. On July 16th, 1945, the first ever detonation of a nuclear weapon was successfully completed in the desert of Los Alamos, New Mexico. The test was named Trinity by Robert Oppenheimer, and this scene depicts the tense evening leading up to the detonation. Oppenheimer, Major General Leslie Groves, played by Matt Damon, and their team decide to proceed with the Trinity test despite bad storms in the area. Oppenheimer also explains the concept of atmospheric ignition to Groves, reassuring him that the chances are near zero. Up against the clock, the test finally takes place at 5:30 in the morning once the storms clear. A countdown ensues, and the detonation is successful, creating a massive, blinding explosion as several teams observe from different vantage points. There's a moment of awe on everyone's faces as the fireball fills the night sky, and after about 40 seconds, a huge shockwave and a wall of sound from the blast hits the team. Once the dust settles, everyone wildly celebrates a successful test, with the mushroom cloud still unfurling into the sky. Oppenheimer has become death, the destroyer of worlds.
So I think this was the obvious choice for us because, well, for a lot of reasons, it's kind of the centerpiece of the film, like you said, Connor. It's the closest we get to kind of, I hate to even use the word like action scene, but it's an exciting thing that we're leading up to for the entirety of the film. And there's just so many stakes here, right? We have theory versus reality. They show several shots of them using formulas to figure out the safe zone of the radius. Is it
Yeah.
correct? Are they going to be in danger? There's also the stake of, is this just going to end the world?
Right.
Nothing had been done like this before. And so there's a huge risk in doing this. And then there's also the stake of, is this going to work? Or did they just waste 3 years and potentially billions of dollars of development in something that doesn't really pan out? So I think it made sense to pick this scene, even though there were, a few other ones in contention, but it's an amazing scene.
Definitely. And I think the level of detail in the scene is stunning because the movie as a whole, but especially in the scene, I think it doesn't really let you take a breath to orient you in the history itself, because this scene in particular, it kind of just plays out in real time and it doesn't want to get bogged down in the details of like the why of it. It's just like we're with these characters, but in the background, you either come in knowing what happened in terms of real history, or you're just seeing it unravel without someone turning to the camera and saying, well, the Manhattan Project was named after, and it just doesn't decide to do that. If you want to, you can be totally consumed with all of these small details. Like Matt Damon saying, they're in a tight time window because of the Potsdam conference. And there isn't that much exposition given to that throughout. Like you either know what Potsdam is or you don't, or in some cases, you even go look it up after the film is done. The movie just doesn't present it to you in a condescending way. It just kind of is, which I love about it.
Yeah, I like I mentioned, this was by far my favorite part of the movie. Cody and I texted each other right after we saw it, and this was the only scene we both threw out as the one that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
In a very long movie that can feel like an extended montage at times, the way Nolan uses real time here just works super well thematically. I thought it really added a heightened sense of urgency to the test.
So I have to hand it to the production team and their attention to detail on this movie because the original Trinity site is still actually an operational army base. And it's a little bit outside of Los Alamos, where the Manhattan Project was based, but it actually wasn't available in time for the filming. So instead, the filmmakers had to recreate the 100-foot steel tower and concrete bunker at something called the Ghost Ranch, which is a huge desert in New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
When we were learning about this in school, the Manhattan Project, I kind of always pictured it in my head as this kind of cold, clinical laboratory. Like it's just these white coated
Mm-hmm.
scientists kind of just tinkering away at a traditional little black like bomb with a little wick coming out of it or something. Like I never really
Right.
pictured the visual here. And I think that's one thing that I love about this is it gives you that visual to sort of imagine. And then at the time growing up learning about this, I didn't watch any historic footage of it, which I've gone back to do now and seeing kind of how accurate it is in terms of what Nolan has constructed around actual archival footage. So that's been really fascinating to see it visualized in this way and how everything in this desert is like a cabin, a cabin like military structure to keep them going for 2 years, but it's not like a laboratory.
Right.
So I love seeing that come to life.
Yeah, I'm with you, Cody. I had always heard more about the Manhattan Project taking place like underground, the University of Chicago. So I just assumed that that's where the bomb was built. I don't know why. I just like that was always what was in my head. And one thing that stuck out to me that I guess I had never thought of before or just seen a picture of is how janky the gadget looks. There's like wires hanging out of it, tape all over it. It's just, I think that really plays into the drama of whether this, slapped together looking thing will actually work or not.
Oh, definitely.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I watched a video about how a lot of the details about the bomb's look were taken from historical photos.
Mhm.
And not only that, but he actually acquired real gadgets to place the uranium and other radioactive isotopes into the bomb. So they were like period specific actual instruments used for that.
Crazy.
You talk about attention to detail. It's like, I don't know how they were able to track these things down, but they did.
Yeah, yeah. And in this scene in particular, there are a lot of little props and detailed touches like that. For example, one of the characters saying, everyone take a welder's glass. And at first you're like, what is he? And then you realize that they're handing out these squares of like UV protected glass that would be embedded in the helmet of a welder. And I love this little prop because you would need something so strong to protect your eyes during that flash of the explosion. And some of the characters are wearing like goggles, some of them are wearing glasses. It's kind of their preference, and you see how it impacts them in different ways, which is kind of cool.
It's also so specific. You wouldn't make up that everybody would have these different preferences. In my head, I just picture everybody kind of picking the same thing. But in this scene, you kind of just see a couple different options. So it just leads to more of the believability of it all.
That's a really good point, and it reminds me when we're all like outside. Oh, the eclipse is coming! Everyone, look at the eclipse! And you have the people who have like ordered their glasses on Amazon. You have people who have like constructed their own, and then you have idiots who are staring just right at it. And you kind of have that with the guy like sitting in his car saying like, "Oh, the windshield will take care of it," and you see him kind of like wincing at it, and it's a cool touch.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about the sound of this scene as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the obvious thing to talk about is Christopher Nolan's decision to withhold the sound of the explosion. And this kind of, in my mind, served a dual function. So on one hand,
Yes,
it keeps the audience in suspense as they await the loud sound in an otherwise near silence, basically. We hear Oppenheimer breathing, but other than that, we don't get much score, sound effects, anything. At the same time, it holds a practical purpose because it is similar to the phenomenon of thunder lagging behind lightning, because light travels faster than sound. And so you actually see that on screen here too.
Also, a really cool detail that you're hearing the sonic boom of the explosion 3 times at different base camps, which I think the geography of the setting can be a little unclear, but you have these distinct base camps. They explain it actually at some point where everyone is going to be, but there's one that's like the closest, there's one that's a bit further away, then there's one that's much further away. And the way you see people kind of lying on the ground or their positioning indicates how close they are to be safe. And the sonic boom going off 3 times, different base camps, obviously they would hear the sound at different times depending on how far they are and different volumes. So hearing it repeat 3 times, again, Mark, to your point, on one hand, it's just a logical way of portraying it. And in addition to that, it gives us that reaction of the boom with 3 different sets of characters adding to that explosive reaction to something that they've helped create.
Hmm. And just a callback to the Mission Impossible episode, this too almost got a jump scare like reaction out of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though I knew it was coming, you just don't know when it's going to actually arrive. And so it actually startled me a little bit when it did.
Yeah, the sound here was really amazing. Super cool to experience that in the theater. And outside of just the sound effects, what did you guys think of Ludwig Göransson's score?
Incredible. The way that he depicted a nuclear test, like you have that in your head of what you would want the music to be during that moment. I think they made the right decision of this intense anxiety leading up to the moment of the explosion, like you were saying, Mark,
Mhm.
and then letting the explosion itself carry out in silence. But the dynamic nature of the score, which by the way was recorded in 5 days,
Wow.
I guess Göransson estimates that it's roughly 2.5 of its 3 hours features music in the film, which is
Whoa.
interesting. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, one clever detail that I really liked about this too was the use of triplets. It's kind of a nerdy, like little music detail, but I think this was probably a little bit of a nod to the idea that this is taking place during the Trinity Test.
Mm.
Trinity
Mhm.
3
Yep.
triplets. I could be wrong about that though.
No, that's very
Yeah,
cool.
that's a really cool pickup. And it sort of reminded me of what Hans Zimmer did with the docking sequence in Interstellar.
Yes.
Almost like this is Ludwig's version of that, and hopefully it'll be remembered in the same way.
Yeah. Next up, I don't think we can talk about this film without bringing up IMAX as a format and the
Mhm.
way, not only the look, but the way that this film was shot.
Hmm.
It was heavily marketed as an IMAX shot feature. I would say the majority of the film is shot in IMAX format
Hmm.
Mhm.
to its great benefit. It works really, really well.
So my question to you guys is, what format did you see it in?
I saw this in just regular format. It's my one comment that I wish I saw this in IMAX because I think it really would have changed my experience of the film. Unfortunately, there are just no IMAX theaters around Chicago. It's very weird. So it kind of, I didn't get the full effect.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw it on a Limax screen, so it wasn't a true IMAX, but it was a bigger screen. But I have to just applaud Nolan's dedication to the IMAX format because this isn't the traditional IMAX experience that you would expect. So normally I would think of something that is heavy in action sequences, something similar to Mission Impossible.
Hmm.
But the fact that this is once again a 3-hour talky drama, it's just really neat to see that he used the format in this way because even if it isn't, pulse pounding action that you're seeing, at the same time, it really kind of adds to the immersion of the experience when you see it on a bigger screen. And there are some incredible landscapes that are photographed in the desert as well. So it's not like it doesn't have anything to offer, but it is definitely counterintuitive to what you would expect in an IMAX experience.
Yeah, definitely. And that ultra high resolution image and that close single shot on
Hmm.
Cillian Murphy throughout the film that is pretty prominent over and over. Just seeing the toil and torment in that man's eyes and face, I think is so paramount to your connection to him as an audience member. Those eyes just kind of like staring down the camera, staring into space, and then complemented by what we're seeing internalized in his mind, which ultimately reflects visually as these little sparks of fire and molecular reactions
Mhm.
and it seems to be reminiscent of the era as well. And we're seeing this real period of history and the aspect ratio of the image evokes that history. It doesn't look ultra modern, but it looks very, very textured and detailed.
Yeah, and actually, I read that Nolan and his team worked with Kodak to develop the first black and white IMAX film stock. So you get that use of color as a visual device to help break up the different parts of the story that we're seeing.
Mhm.
Black and white kind of depicts anything that's taking place around the Senate hearings that's interspersed with the rest of the film. Meanwhile, the color scenes, which are most of the movie, tell that story of Oppenheimer's life up to the Senate hearings at the end.
Hmm. And by the way, how scared shitless do you have to be running celluloid film as explosions are happening? You have maybe a couple shots to get it right,
Right.
but you do not want camera to go down. You do not want your exposure to be incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, you want your focus to be on point. There are so many factors here that could be missed, especially on analog film format,
Oh, yeah.
that would be much easier in digital. However, they have chosen the hard way out to their completely wonderful benefit of the way it ends up looking in the film.
Yeah, that actually kind of reminds me of the movie Nope. You know,
Oh,
the
right,
the
right.
stress of him shooting on analog film to capture like a once in a lifetime event and the struggles of doing that.
Oh, right.
Mhm.
The cinematographer in the film.
That's
Yeah.
a great
beating-
reference.
Yeah.
So, contrary to the belief of a lot of people online, Christopher Nolan did not, in fact, detonate a nuclear bomb for this.
Right.
Instead, you know, they had their own concoction of different materials that they used and exploded, and they created their own, 200-foot high explosion in this desert, and they just shot it from so many different angles, whether it's a close up on the side of the explosion or the center of the explosion. It just engulfs the entire image, and it just transports you to this place where you're simultaneously in awe but horror of like what we were capable of creating, and the damage that this can do to human life when used as a weapon.
Definitely. Yeah. The explosion itself in the scene, probably one of the most beautiful explosions or things, effects put to film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever seen something so beautiful in this high frame rate capture, just the billowing flames consuming the entire camera. It is just so beautiful, but obviously massively dangerous and destructive, and went on to completely change the world in horrifying ways. But the way that they respect the power of this thing visually is very clear.
Yeah, and I love the cuts back and forth between the explosion unfolding and then the reaction on the team's faces. We get a couple of great close-ups of Teller with his sunglasses or goggles and his face just like slathered in sunscreen.
Mhm.
And the full screen takeover of the explosion does a great job of, like you said, making the audience feel the impact of that blast, like the characters would be experiencing it.
Another fun detail before the explosion itself, there are these flares going off intermittently throughout the scene. I think the purpose being to kind of, on a practical level, light the scene so we're seeing what's going on, like with the characters moving into place, but also in the context of the film reality. It's a way of them seeing out to the desert to make sure that everything still looks okay for testing, lighting up towards the tower, make sure nothing is awry or is going to interfere with the blast. But it's just a great practical storytelling device visually.
Yeah.
These flares go up and kind of introducing you to areas of shadow and darkness and revealing more and more.
So I know I had mentioned this a little bit, but there were some great performances in this scene as well. So, you get Teller, you get Oppenheimer, Matt Damon's character. What did you guys think? Did any stand out to you in particular?
Connor, can I just say, going back to your comment about Benny Safdie's performance, which is hilarious throughout most of the movie,
Yeah,
but
it was.
the way he is the one weird character who somehow believes that smearing sunscreen all over his face is somehow gonna like protect him, just because they don't quite know what the effect of this detonation is going to be. And the way he says, "Is it rubbed in?"
I loved that.
Yeah, about his sunscreen, like he's at the beach or something, like it's not rubbed in at all. And that just leads me to say the writing and performances paired together. I can't imagine how hard it must be to insert some levity and comedy into a tense moment like this from a writing and acting perspective. You're just dealing with such a historic, consequential event that's very, very serious. And then you have to execute that as an actor. And I think Matt Damon really nailed that balance and that line you have to walk where a couple of his lines and his performance, such as saying, Robert, try not to blow up the world.
Yeah.
It just
Right.
inserts that moment where these characters are resigned to whatever is going to happen with this bomb through humor. It's kind of like, we've gone this far. Let's see what happens. Hopefully we're not all obliterated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought Matt Damon's performance was really great too. He did add a lot of great one-liners as well, which I can't remember the last Nolan movie that actually had me laugh, but there were a couple lines in there that were pretty funny. I remember the one about contraception being used
Mm-hmm.
when they first get to the town in New Mexico. That was a pretty funny line. One unexpected actor in this movie that I was really happy to see was Josh Hartnett.
Oh yeah.
So
Mhm.
great to see him back on screen. I feel like his absence from film was felt in a lot of ways. I feel like I hadn't seen him for 10, 15 years or so. So it's just
Yeah.
like seeing like an old friend pop up on screen again. And I thought he delivered a great performance as well.
Yeah, he did a great job, and one of those people that just doesn't seem to age. I mean, he looks
Mhm.
the same as he did, back when we were growing up. Another unexpected actor that popped up was Josh Peck. What did you guys
Right.
think of him in this
Mm.
scene?
I didn't even realize it was him. And then Monica pointed out that
Uh-huh.
that's Josh from Drake and Josh. I was like, no,
Yeah.
no chance. And then, yeah.
Not only show up, but have like arguably one of the most important jobs of the film,
Right.
which is to
Right.
like actually press the button. So
Uh-huh.
So there were a lot of surprise cameos in this movie, and one that I immediately knew I was going to have to ask Connor about was
I know what
Rami
you're gonna
Malek's
say.
appearance,
So-
Oscar winner.
When I think his character gets revealed in a funny way too. It's like somebody steps aside or he turns around, and
Yeah.
if I haven't mentioned it on the show before, I really, for whatever reason, have a dislike for Rami Malek. So I actually
Irrational in some ways, would you say?
irrational, perhaps, maybe, but I actually threw my hands up in the theater, just like involuntarily, like, come on, like this guy's got to be in here.
I was
going
just
so well.
I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop the entire time, because you're right. It's revealed by he like bends down and picks
Yeah,
something
yeah.
and then he pops up into frame and it's him, and you're like, oh my, why would? Okay,
Talk about a jump scare.
Right.
That's what it was for me.
yeah. It's
But
just
the-
such a small role, and then
Right.
I was glad to see that they introduced him as like a linchpin testimony later in the film to actually like
Right,
do,
for the
do
Senate
something
hearings. Yeah.
with the
Mhm.
role. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Cody, because when I saw him on screen, I'm like, wait a minute. This is a Oscar-winning best actor just kind of showing up for a very small role out of
Mhm.
nowhere. And then obviously, there's that pivotal scene at the end of the movie.
Oscar winner, Connor. Oscars.
Can't
I
take that
know.
away from him.
No.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to bring up really fast, speaking of the humor we were talking about earlier, I love these characters doing like side betting, a lot of betting happening on the, I guess, the amount of kilotons that the bomb will produce, which just speaks to the fact that like they don't really know how dangerous this thing is and how far away they have to be and what they have to do. So there's like all that inherent risk there. But this is such a grimly funny thing to insert, and also with another side bet for the atmospheric ignition, which that concept being that this chain reaction that they set off could ignite the atmosphere itself and basically destroy the entire world.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. So, and that was a great way to introduce that concept back into the film, which they mentioned earlier, as he's explaining it to Matt Damon's character, just to give this scene that extra boost of tension.
Yeah, it felt really real to me, this element of gallows humor used throughout the film. It's obviously like something that maybe the characters are using to kind of rationalize or just get through this dark thing that they're creating and introducing to the world.
Great point.
And speaking of performances, one thing I found really interesting, and I'm sure it was in the script too, was the celebration that the scientist had afterwards, because it really made you realize that these are first and foremost scientists who had an experiment they had been working on for the longest time, and then they see it come to fruition in this giant explosion. And so they're cheering at
Mhm.
first because they're just so excited by their their theories becoming reality and all this hard work that they put in is finally kind of paying off. But at the same time, you can almost see the weight on their faces of the implications of this
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. So I think it was part performances, but also part scripting too. That was
Mm-hmm.
just it was just perfect.
Can you guys imagine working on something for 2+ years of utmost importance amidst a terrible, terrible war involving genocide and millions of people dying, and to see your work a success in a single moment, a literal flash on screen, and the build up to that moment? I think that is a great reason why this scene works so well, is because it depicts that moment, something that has been building for years and years, played out in an instant, and how these characters interact with that moment.
I don't think we could end this scene discussion without talking about Cillian Murphy himself and his depiction of Oppenheimer. What did you guys think of his performance?
Once in a lifetime role, looks like him, acts beautifully. I don't think you could have found a better pick.
Yeah, I was really happy to see Cillian Murphy given this role, such a huge role, like Cody said. And he's delivered so many amazing performances, but I can't quite think of one quite this big. And he just completely delivered, really nailed it. And they did a great job kind of de-aging him, so to speak, for the younger scenes. Like he can pull off looking like a young man, but then also, they really dialed up his older appearance for the later scenes, especially like the very later scenes of the movie where he's getting the medal.
Right.
But he handles that arc of life very masterfully, playing the younger, there's so much packed into this role, playing a younger person all the way up to playing somebody towards the end of their life. And you really see the struggle that he's dealing with on his face, even if he doesn't necessarily talk about it in the film. You see it telegraphed by his expression, what he's dealing with, the way he kind of pauses about things. So great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, if actors as human beings had taglines, his would be like a face made for IMAX. It's just like it is just so perfect.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Very, very famous quote, often misused, misunderstood. In this scene itself, I love how it's being used. It kind of just drops in as this shadowy echo. It almost makes me wish all the more that he didn't discover the quote in the way that he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost wish that it was just inserted here without any prior context. I think it would have worked better. It almost seems as though it's like the real Oppenheimer saying it in this moment of realization, even though it was actually Cillian Murphy performing it.
Yeah, such a great line, and really smart to include it for this film. It just carried a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I think as we're coming to a close here, just looking at all the different disciplines to make this scene not only iconic, but also kind of delivering, which is kind of a grim way to put it, but the scene that everybody is kind of coming to see, right? You want to know what happens with the Trinity Test. Of course, we knew going in what the ultimate result of this movie was, but just seeing it depicted on screen with all these different elements, ranging from the performances to the fact that it was shot on IMAX, to the use of score and the delay of sound effects, I think they all kind of combine together to create a really indelible image that you kind of take away when you leave the theater.
Yeah, well said. Completely agree. And now that we've broken down the Trinity Test scene in detail, we'd like to welcome our guest, Scott Fisher, the special effects supervisor on the film, for his pro take.
Amateur or professional?
Professional.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us on Scenecraft to talk about Oppenheimer.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So, as this is the pro take section of the podcast, we'd love to do a brief introduction on your role as the special effects supervisor on the film. Can you tell us about how you originally got into the world of special effects and a little bit about the role of a special effects supervisor?
Well, I'm a second generation special effects guy. My father was Thomas Fisher. He worked on a lot of kind of classic 80s and 90s movies, Titanic, Terminator 2, all kinds of action movies. I worked on a lot of those as well. working through the business over the years, staying, current as more visual effects and things are going on. My father kind of retired, and I kind of took over the family business, if you will, and continued on, and was fortunate enough to link up with Mr. Nolan. He was doing a lot of films that were kind of part in the UK, part here. I got on a few of those, and then we built a kind of a good relationship. And I've done the last 6 of his films, so that's pretty much how I ended up on this one.
So, when you're tasked to recreate the look of an atomic reaction, where do you even begin? Are you referencing archival footage? And how reliable is that when you're coming up with your own way of recreating this historic event?
I think it was valuable, but I mean, it was kind of amazing. You don't really realize like the technology that they had at the time, and a lot of people don't realize every image you've seen is either colorized and crazy high speed. So it does have a different look to it. So we knew whatever we were going to do, we were probably going to have to change the timing. There were definitely things that they talked about, the brightness of the flash and the size of it, and knowing that we do a lot of like forced perspective stuff. So knowing that we were going to use that to our advantage to try to make it feel as big, because there's no way to make it as big as, even close to as big as it was. But so that's the challenge, trying to find out how you can do it as big as you possibly can, and then photograph it in a way where it feels as big and as visceral and get the most out of it.
What was your process like to prep the explosives for an uncontrolled environment in New Mexico versus something like a soundstage?
Well, for large scale kind of pyro events, that's what you want. You want to be outdoors. A lot of times, I think that's why Chris kind of likes having me around, is working with my dad and early in my career. And there was much less visual effects. And in a lot of ways, you had to kind of, figure out a version of everything. So I think that link to that era where, those early films, we did tons of like large scale pyro in exterior environments, worked on the Rambo films and Terminator 2 and some of that stuff. So, you have a good basis for what we're going to do. And that's kind of where you want to do it, is outdoors and where you have lots of space.
And did the desert environment with your simulated storm impact that pyro setup at all, or was it pretty straightforward?
I think we were very lucky with the weather. While we were filming there, we got a little bit of weather, which was nice because we wanted that story-wise. Famously, the night before, there was quite a bit of weather. So I think we captured a bit of that. And then once we were actually doing it, high winds and that kind of stuff would have really affected our event. You don't get the same shape and size to it if you get a bunch of wind. So we lucked out with the nice calm nights when we were doing it.
And then moving into the Trinity Test sequence itself, we know you can't necessarily detail how to build an explosive device, but can you walk us through some of the work behind creating the bright flash of the explosion and the subsequent mushroom cloud? What does that process look like on the shoot day?
Well, we in prep, we knew, there were several vantage points of the Trinity explosion at different distances. And so we knew we were going to kind of try to capture it from each of those. So the plan was always to do it at least 2 times from each position. So we were kind of prepared to do 2 each night. We had kind of a large tower that we could set part of our explosives up on. The real tower is about 100 feet. Our tower is about 30 feet. We had our explosives and all the stuff we use, in the movies. A lot of times they think we try to get the most out of it. We're not into the high explosive, like most powerful. We try to make the least look like the most. So everything we do is combination, expansion of stuff we've done and other things, knowing that like the aluminum powder and magnesium really gives you that bright initial flash, and then timing that with the gasoline and propane that we use, and then it's the sequencing of these events. Like you do the flash, and then like a couple tenths of a second later, detonate the gasoline, and then there's other mortars that push up through it to kind of create the mushroom cloud. So, we did some testing and played around with the timing to get the most out of it and the most for the size. And then, like I said, we lined it up with kind of with a forced perspective to get it closer and make it feel as big as we could.
And how would something like this setup on the day, relying on making a little seem like a lot, compare to something like your plane crash work in Tenet, for example? where I would assume you really only get one try at it.
That was a true one shot deal. That was a lot of we did a lot of math, a lot of calculations. We did more kind of braking tests where we did out on the open runways. It was funny because I did Top Gun right before that, and we made a bunch of tow rigs for these F-14s. So when we were in prep, we went in and Chris and I first started talking about it, and he's like, "Are we gonna? What do you think about crashing the plane and doing it?" And I'm like, kind of confident saying we just did Top Gun. These planes were like 40,000 pounds, 45,000. At the time, I didn't know he really wanted to do a 747, which the lightest version of a 747 is like over 200,000 pounds. So I was like instantly I was so proud of my 40, 50,000 pound tow rig. And then I was like, wait a minute, okay, we gotta, but because it all the stopping distances and the braking, everything goes up, exponentially as you go there. So, but it worked out. It worked out good. So.
Absolutely. It looks incredible. Once in a lifetime shot for sure.
Yeah, it was fun when we did a lot of the Q&A on that, and Andrew Jackson, who's a visual effects and good friend of mine as well, and they would always like ask him, so on the plane crash, what kind of stuff did you? He goes, well, not really anything. They towed it in. We had to remove a little rope, and they're like, well, but you added some pyro stuff. Because no, they did the pyro too. He's like, well, you had to add like, no, that was there too. He's like, pretty much we just we added a little bit of wind to a couple of plants, and
So cool.
So, some of my favorite moments in the film involve Oppenheimer's thought process, and we get these visualizations of quantum reactions. I thought this was very successfully translated to the audience through these abstract waves of flame and particles. I know you can't give away all your secrets, but can you tell us a little bit about the visuals and how they were conceptualized to get certain colors and textures?
A lot of the stuff we did was very that it's like we were just saying in the Trinity test, we try to go as big as possible, and then strangely enough, to do all that stuff, we tried to go as small as possible, and then changing the speed as well. A lot of that stuff we undercranked and used as small as particles as we could, and then like you said, it's very abstract. I mean, we had kind of meetings where we looked at stuff that had been done in other films. And, obviously, Chris is very, kind of an analog kind of guy. So a lot of things he looked at, he just didn't want. I think his methodology usually is because there's so few visual effects in a lot of these movies, he feels like if you go like the full CGI route, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb, especially in this movie. And like when we did Dunkirk, you look at the movie and the overall feel, the tone of the movie is so grounded that it would be hard to get a pure CGI shot to really be believable. Mm-hmm. So we just looked at a lot of different things and fire at high speed, fire at really low speed, particles and fluids, just a little bit of everything. Water going up, water going down, the sparks, different frame rates with wind and without wind. And, it's like, it was crazy. It's like anything, what you thought would be something that would look really neat would kind of look neat. And then we'd abandon it and then we'd try something else. And, we end up with some of these, those spinning beads that we did at really low frame rates that really had that blurred kind of wavy motion. And same thing, just reading some of the descriptions from some of the scientists and talking about these particles and how this energy, and no one knows what it looks like, but there's their kind of descriptions of their thoughts, and then try to translate that to stuff. And we would try different things and do experiments. We'd show it to Chris and he would pick the stuff that he would want to go further on and photograph it with a camera and with film, put it on IMAX. He had all these little pieces, and then try to figure out where he wanted to put them in the movie at different times,
We actually read a little bit about the small scale work on items like ping pong balls. Were there any other unexpected methods or materials that proved to be effective?
Everyone thought the ping pong balls were going to be really good, but that was a failure. But, but I mean, all of us included, we had a couple of good experiments there, and we had a couple other. We did a bunch of stuff with magnets. We had swirling magnets and ball bearings and small BB stuff. We did underwater pyro, small scale explosions underwater because you have this expanding mass of water and air. That's been done on that's kind of an old school technique as well. Mm-hmm. like I said, there were no real ideas that were kind of off the table. And then even stuff that we did some thermite, and no one really liked it. And then Andrew Jackson took it and kind of inverted the image a bit and then played it. And then all of a sudden it was good again, So it was kind of, it's unusual not knowing exactly what you're looking for. There's no storyboard. There's nothing saying what you're looking for, but you only know it's wrong once somebody sees it and says it's wrong, I guess, right? So.
Could you walk us through your collaboration with the camera department and if this led to changes to your pyro setups on the fly to get a little more variation?
Most of the work we did with the camera department was on our micro unit. They kind of Hoyta's a good friend of mine, and he also did a lot of engineering and kind of figured out how we could do these probe lenses to kind of, we'd have these tanks with the swirling particles, and then we'd put portholes in them, and he could push we made like a waterproof fitting so they could push the probe lens through the particles and give it some of that swirling motion, but then also moving through it as well. But a lot of collaboration between the departments, and it's nice when you understand what everyone kind of has and can do and what you can add to it, so you kind of work together nicely.
Though the crux of the film is the Trinity sequence, were there any non-explosive special effects builds on the film that you were particularly fond of?
Of all the films we've done with Chris, this is definitely, obviously his films are so ambitious, and, we travel, and there's all kinds of large scale stuff for our department. But I was very proud. We'd end up doing all the gadget itself, and making all the pieces for the assembly and all those bits. We made all that stuff in-house, learning that whole process of how they did it and how they armed it and dropped the plutonium bit in, and figuring out all those pieces so we'd have them, even this little like vintage crane that would lift the cap off, and the stand and the winch to bomb, all those pieces, they all were correct. That's one of the things we get to do on these films, especially the historical ones. You kind of figure out how they assembled this bomb and all these hexagons and how they fit together, and the caps and what each part was and what it did,
Even though some modern films are using digital visual effects very well, why do you think using practical effects ultimately creates a connection to the audience?
When you see these massive like set pieces moving, or even pyro events or different things, it's like there's a lot of parts to a movie, like when you try to add them up to what makes it feel grounded or what makes it feel real. And it's, I always said it's very much like a magician, and they never do the same trick over and over. If you keep doing the same trick, it becomes worn out and used. And I think, when you have a visual effect and a practical effect and maybe a miniature, or those combinations where the audience, obviously, if the goal is for the story to be good enough that they're not looking and thinking about these subtle things, taking them out of that moment. But that's part of how you keep them in that moment, is you're just believing everything you're seeing.
Well, thank you, Scott, so much for all this detail on the film and for everything you did to make it that much better. Congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you again to Scott Fisher, Special Effects Supervisor, for his pro take on Oppenheimer. And thank you to our listeners and fellow movie enthusiasts for reliving this scene with us. Do you have a favorite scene from Oppenheimer? You can email us at contact@scenecraftpodcast.com with any of your thoughts or comments, or follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, or Threads at Scenecraft Podcast for the latest updates on the show. You can also support the podcast by leaving us a review or star rating on your platform of choice. A very special thanks to Jordan Summerlad for our theme music. Stay tuned for a nightcap episode where we'll be discussing Barbie with 2 special guests. This has been Scenecraft, where we break down the craft behind our favorite scenes. See you all next time.